All right, everybody, welcome back to the A to Z Poll podcast. My name is Zachary Siegel, and let's get into it. All right, this was a crazy week of college football. And if you're a listener, you know this is the second episode of the week. Earlier this week, I had Daniel Rotter on, one of my close friends, and we kind of discussed, some mid-year stuff, things that, we're excited for, things that have happened. Uh, if you want to check that out, you can go do that. It'll be on Spotify and YouTube as well. Um, and I've also collabed with Hoops from the Hills, which is a more college basketball centric post channel that is going to be posting also roughly weekly. All right. The last thing that I'm going to do, the last little bit of shilling I'm going to do for you guys is, if you like it, if you like this kind of content, if you like college football, if you're into it, please make sure to like, subscribe, share, do whatever you need to do. But really enjoy having you here. All right. So this week was a crazy week, and it's going to be one of those weeks where I'm going to have to be doing a lot of hand up here. I was wrong. I'm not too afraid to admit it. I've been wrong before, and I'm sure I'll be wrong again. But without further ado, let's get into the list. So staying at number one. So for a few weeks now, and I know there's some speculation that there are teams that are better, teams that are not. I don't really think there are right now. I think from a top down look at a team from really any angle you can look at, the Texas Longhorns are the best team in college football right now. They put an absolute beating on Oklahoma last week, 34-3 in the Red River Showdown. I mean, even starting out flat, right? Even looking a little bit, less than stellar with Quinn Ewers throwing an interception on the first drive. River Helms took over at tight end, and the rest of the team was really able to carry them on to carry even when he was struggling in the beginning. Then he, figured it out, threw for a bucket of yards, and I mean that Texas defense held really really firm. Now, to give Oklahoma some credit, their defense did very good in the beginning. It's really hard to outthink Steve Sarkisian for that long. And I don't think that any teams are going to be able to this year. But I mean, they started a rookie freshman quarterback in Michael Hawkins, which is I believe they said was the first time that's happened that true freshman quarterback has started in the Red River Showdown. They did better than I expected them to do, if I'm being honest. He took some hits. He ran it over 20 times. Some of it was him being a freshman. Some of it was Brent Venables scheming. I really think, and I said this in the earlier podcast this week, but I really think that they need to move away from this pseudo triple option style of offense that is just not working. All right, number two, upset city. Oregon Ducks take down Ohio State 32-31. I don't think I've ever seen the NCAA move so fast in my life to get rid of that running clock on the 12-man on the field penalty that Dan Lanning did. That was so funny. He admits to doing it. The NCAA moves the next day. They didn't move for 5 years when NIL was emerging, and now this happens. It's really funny to me. But Oregon really stepped up, and I'm not sure if it's a Oregon being the best Big Ten team, or if it's an Ohio State really, or all teams really struggling in playing in the Great Northeast. I mean, we saw Michigan lose to Washington last week, also in the Great Northeast, and I personally thought Michigan was a better team. Now, the biggest takeaway I think from this game is just the Ducks' big playability, right? And we'll talk about Ohio State in a second, but Ohio State really, really played arguably a better game overall, except for just a few really big plays. And I think also they game planned pretty well for Dillon Gabriel, but Dillon Gabriel played and did things that I didn't think he really was capable of doing. He designed runs where he's making DBs miss, throwing for a bucket of yards, making some really pinpoint throws that I just, didn't peg him as that kind of player to make. Good for you, Dillon. You've propelled yourself into my Heisman list. And if you keep this up, I mean, Oregon could have a real shot at a natty in the future. Number three. So number 3 and 4, I'm going to kind of talk about together. So at 3, I have Penn State, who took down USC 33-30. Then I have Ohio State, who we just talked about, who lost. 31-32 against Oregon. Right now, and they're going to play, I believe, in 2 weeks after this. But right now, I would probably, if I were a betting man, I would probably bet Ohio State to beat Penn State. But Penn State matches up really, really well this year with Ohio State. And under new offensive coordinator Andy Kotelnicki, which I feel like we talk about him every week, that guy's going to get a head coaching job somewhere next year. They have that big playability, and they used that big playability against USC. And when that wasn't working in the beginning, that's when USC took that big lead. But Penn State maybe even got a little lucky at the end. If Miller Moss places that ball just a little better, puts it in his wide receiver's hands instead of too high and throws a pick on the second to last play of the game might be over, right? They're in field goal range. That's a field goal with time expiring. Nonetheless, Penn State with their long ball ability and Drew Aller's got a big arm and is playing really, really well right now. Kind of has a similar style, at least the style that Oregon played last week, to what Oregon used just then to beat Ohio State. And I mean, in Beaver, in a whiteout, in a couple weeks, it would not shock me if Ohio State fell to Penn State. That being said, though, in a neutral site, especially or in the shoe, I think that I think Ohio State's taking it every day of the week. Now, speaking of Ohio State, Will Howard did not play poorly. He actually played very well. He went 28 for 26, over 300 yards and a couple touchdowns. He had a very, very good game. Like I said, it seems to be very difficult to play in the American Northwest if you're not accustomed to playing there. And I do genuinely think that the Ohio State Oregon game was a preview of the Big Ten championship. When they play again, we'll see what happens. At this point, any outcome would probably not be super shocking. But Ohio State kind of got the unlucky end of the stick here. I think that ticky-tacky Jeremiah Smith offensive PI call that put them at a field goal range that also kind of messed up everything, messed up the whole offensive flow because it seemed like people didn't realize that the clock was going to start back once the ball was set. Therefore, they only had 6 seconds left. And also, I've watched that same Will Howard play at the very end where he slid out the clock about five times. You're down when you start your slide. He absolutely, at least if the screen time was correct, started his slide with a second left. There should have been an opportunity to make a 50-plus yard field goal there. Would they have made it? Would it have mattered? I don't know. But there's definitely going to be some bad blood the next time these two teams play. All right, now, the team that I think will be playing Texas in the SEC championship, but is also playing Texas this weekend, Georgia, took down Mississippi State 41-31. In the battle of the Bulldogs, they handle business. I will say Georgia didn't look as stellar in the second half, and giving up 31 points to a team like Mississippi State, who is just not known right now for their high-powered offense, does make me a little nervous against Texas. But if Kirby Smart is going to have a game plan, it's going to have to be again in this against this team. I think that Texas is a better team than Alabama, and I think that they're going to be much harder to stop in the second half, especially if they get hot in the first half than Alabama was. Right? I've said this a few times that I think that in that Georgia Alabama game, if you add just a few more minutes of game time onto that clock, Georgia pulls out the win. And I think that Texas is going to need they're going to need all the time they have to beat Texas. That's probably my game of the week. I don't see how any other game could be your game of the week. It's circled right on the calendar. Should be, in my opinion, like I said, an SEC title matchup. Even if Texas wins and Georgia falls to 2 losses, I still think that the 2 best teams in the conference, which I wholeheartedly believe are Georgia and Texas, will find themselves playing in Atlanta. Number 6, Miami. Miami finally got a much needed week off. They get Louisville next week. They have not been winning dominantly, which is definitely something that is slightly concerning. They've needed a little bit of ref help. You could say they've needed ref help. I don't know. Like I said this last week, I think that their initial I thought that Virginia Tech call was correct, but I thought that they definitely got some ref help against Cal. Louisville is not a pushover team. Tyler Shaw is not a pushover player, and this defense is really going to have to hold steadfast. I've been saying this all year that complacency is a killer, and I think that Miami should be anything but complacent right now. Like I said, they're undefeated, but very well could have 2 losses right now and be finding themselves ranked in like 23rd, right? Or unranked at all. So that's also going to be a game this week that I'm going to be paying some very, very close attention to. Number 7, the Iowa State Cyclones. Now, looking at this team and the schedule that they faced, they just probably had their toughest game, which was against West Virginia. They went into the coal miner country and won 28-16. West Virginia had a very clinical drive in the first drive of the game that capped off with a Jaheim White touchdown. And then after that, Iowa State just made the necessary adjustments to absolutely, rock and roll through the Mountaineers. Iowa State is like they play a lot, in my opinion, like Michigan from last year. And I've heard this term be used before, and I used it last week, the boa constrictor. They get stronger as the game goes on. They will continue to make adjustments and be ahead of you and just continue to sulk away these games and add points and make you make mistakes that they're just not going to be making because of the fact that they're a veteran team and just a very good program overall. Um, Number 8, Clemson. This is a team that's offense has been on fire recently. The Tigers are just, you know, rolling through opponents. They just won their 17th straight game against Wake Forest, 49-10. Like, this is a team that are just dumping points on teams. I think although Miami is ranked 6th, Clemson and Miami that would probably be an insane game right now. And if they end up playing in the championship, you know, my money might end up being on Clemson just because of how high powered that offense has been. Now, that's not to say Miami isn't a very good team, but this Clemson team is looking very, very scary at the moment. Number 9, and probably my first major apology to a fan base, LSU. I've been talking the most smack on your guys' team and Garrett Nussmeier the entire year. But Garrett Nussmeier definitely had his best game of the season, despite his cough couple interceptions. Ole Miss clearly has some soul searching to do. They clearly are in a weird level of complacency, which we'll talk about. No spoilers, but later on the list. LSU definitely shocked me with this win. I think that they kind of took this Kentucky method of just not letting Ole Miss run away with it. And to Ole Miss's credit, they did have, or not to Ole Miss's credit, but to LSU's, kind of play devil's advocate real quick. Ole Miss did miss a few huge opportunities, but you know, LSU played a heck of a ball game, and it was a much lower scoring affair than we thought it was going to be, especially from what we saw last year. That 50 plus victory in Oxford was a crazy game that I thought would be between Jackson Dart and Jaden Daniels last year. That being said, good win LSU. You're quietly up to 5-1, I believe 3rd in the SEC at the moment. You guys are more than capable of making a big run. I believe that now, and we'll see what happens next week. Number 10, BYU, rounding out the top 10, a team that I'm a little higher on, but that's just because kind of a similar vibe to Clemson. This team is absolutely steamrolling their opponents. They beat Arizona, a very, very good team in Arizona, 41-19. They beat they steamrolled Kansas State. They've steamrolled almost every single one of their opponents that they faced so far, except for SMU in the beginning of the season, who, is also going to be a top 25 team. Look, these guys under Jake Ratliff can be absolutely a contender for the Big 12. And the creativity that I see in their plays, I mean, it's not even trick plays. When you're doing them often, they're just executing their blocks and executing whatever. Each player is winning each rep, which is just a really special and fun thing to see. BYU, I think, can compete with almost any team in the country at this time, and it'll be really, really interesting when we see them play Iowa State, if we get to see that, just because Iowa State relies on teams, kind of crap in the bed, and BYU just doesn't do that. So that'll be interesting to see. Out of the top 10 for the first time in probably a very long time is the Alabama Crimson Tide eking out a win versus South Carolina 27-25. I mean, do they even deserve that win? If you watched that game, you know that South Carolina, probably could have won that game, right? Alabama up what, 27 to 19, 27-18 with less than 2 minutes to go. Crazy toe drag touchdown by the young wide receiver, and then not being able to fall in an onside kick. I mean, they're lucky that a Hail Mary didn't basically end their season as far as SEC championships go. Alabama and Kalen DeBoer needs to take this job very seriously, because these Alabama teams, or these Alabama boosters, are just not going to put up with this stuff. I think that Alabama has the talent to compete with anyone in the country because it's Alabama, and they're going to keep having this talent, but they're going to fall very quickly out of the national spotlight if they keep up what they're keeping up. Number 12, a team that I'm just so excited for, and it's just so fun to watch. Boise State. I mean, the Rainbow Warriors did not stand a chance this week. I turned on the game, second drive, first play that I watch, Ashton Jeanty takes it over 50 yards to the house, ending the day with 237 total yards and 2 total touchdowns. He's unstoppable. I mean, Michael Myers back there is just feeding. And these teams are planning for it too. They're stacking the box. They're literally doing everything in their power to stop him, and he's just not going down. He looks like this weird mixture of like the steadiness and quickness of Barry Sanders, and just the sheer pure running back ability, the run through you and breakaway speed kind of ability of Derrick Henry. He really feels like the perfect back right now. And if he can keep up this pace and break Barry's record, or break any, or do what he needs to do in order to, potentially win the Heisman, he should be a first round pick. He should win the Heisman. He should break records. I mean, it's kind of crazy to see what this guy's doing right now. Number 13, a team that's also been a little disappointing recently and just barely eked out a win over a team they absolutely should have annihilated, but that's going to be Florida. That's going to be Tennessee beating Florida 23-17. Tennessee played better this week, but Nico Iamaleava just is not hitting his roots the way that he should. He needs to see it to believe it, and sometimes believing isn't always seeing, or however the Polar Express quote goes. He is not trusting the play. And what I mean by that is when you're a quarterback, and this is much easier to see in veteran quarterbacks, throwing a receiver open or throwing to a spot is much different than throwing to something right in front of you. If I'm standing 10 feet in front of you, that's much easier for you to throw a ball to me than if there's a wall in between us and you have to just trust your throw and throw it to where I'm going to be. Nico is not throwing it where he needs to be. He's throwing it. He's waiting till he's seeing things. And sometimes that means the play is too late, and that's leading to mistakes, and that's leading to him holding the ball for too long. He has the athletic ability to make up for some of these broken down plays, but as we saw against the Arkansas game, that's what got to him. He's a young quarterback. He has a lot of growing, and I think he will do a lot of growing. But as of now, that is a more or less concern for me. Number 14, another team with an early loss that is just, continuing to be dominant is Notre Dame. Beating Stanford 49-7. This is exactly what Notre Dame needs to be doing in order to get their name back into this Heisman, or not Heisman, I'm sorry, this playoff race, right? They have a gift in 2 weeks when they get to play Navy, who's a ranked opponent at this point, because they need every ranked opponent they can get, right? Florida State's no longer available. They beat Louisville when they were ranked. They need to get, every single good quality ranked win that they can get, because if they don't, they're just not going to have the strength of schedule to make the playoff. We're seeing this with schools like Liberty, who, could even win their division. But, if you look at their strength schedule and you're like, wow, yeah, this team, do they deserve to be in the playoff? Number 15, Indiana. They did not have a game this week, but Kurt Signetti might be the most baller coach in college football at this point. Curtis Work is looking like he's, in any other year would be a much bigger, case for Heisman. He's minimized the turnovers in the last couple of weeks. I think that this team is going to be very hard to beat. And right now, would probably be considered um, for the playoff. I mean, Kurt Signetti said, "Look me up. I don't lose." That's pretty awesome. I mean, and he doesn't. He didn't lose much at JMU last year, and he hasn't lost at all at Indiana. He says he doesn't lose. I believe him. Number 16, the Texas A&M Aggies. This is another team I would like to apologize for. A team that I'm making amends now by putting him up in the top 16. I counted them out in the beginning of the year when they lost to Notre Dame. Then when Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois, I was like, wow, Texas A&M sucks. Hey, they have done a lot of really good things, and they have won a lot of games pretty dominantly. And now Notre Dame's looking like a much better team, which makes this loss much more forgivable. Connor Weigman is finally looking like the player and prospect that even Jimbo Fisher back then wanted to see, right? So this Texas A&M team will definitely rain on some parades later in the year, and they get Texas right at the very end. That could be quite a game. Number 17, a team that probably should have been a little higher earlier in the year, but I let not be so high, is the 6-0 Pitt Panthers. They took on a 17-15 win over Cal this week, and Cal, in my opinion, is a criminally underrated team. Excuse me, sorry. They have a lot of talent on that team between Jaden Ott and Fernando Mendoza. Even in the defense, they got a great set of linebackers back there. This was probably Eli Holstein and Desmond Reed's worst games of the season, but it was also they also still won. It probably was one of their more important games of the season be to just show that level of perseverance. Now they already have made some comeback wins this year, but right now Pitt is putting themselves in a very good spot to be like a dark horse later on. I believe they get SMU either this week or the week after, which would be a very, very interesting game. Number 18, Kansas State. They took on a very tough victory against Colorado this week. I mean, everybody on that team did something, and Avery Johnson, in weeks of doing things that you didn't think you players would do, is Avery Johnson won the game with his arm. He had negative 15 rushing yards, which is very unlike him. He's quite the runner, and for him to go out there and win a game through the air is, especially against a much better than last year Colorado defense, and kind of have this like quarterback duel with Shedeur Sanders towards the end, and to come out on top is a very, very important thing to do, especially as a young quarterback. The Wildcat defense does concern me now. I mean, they're against probably one of the highest powered offenses in the Big 12, but they definitely need to. Their second half definitely was a little bit less than stellar, I'd say. They get to travel to Morgantown this weekend. We'll see how that goes. Number 19, Southern Methodist University Mustangs. They did not have a game this week, but they get to face Duke, Pitt, and Boston College in the next few weeks. Now, SMU has quietly made a case for them to be much better, especially since the early season loss to Nevada. But the rest of their schedule is going to look, it's going to be very, very difficult. And if they can come out of this unscathed, they should absolutely be in contention for the ACC title. It's just going to come down to some later season logistics, but they got some pretty solid competition here. And if they can keep chugging right behind that stud of a tight end, RJ Maryland, then they should have no problems rolling through these teams. Number 20, Mizzou. I mean, that's where they were last week. I don't really care that they, walloped UMass 45-3. I mean, they clearly were just taking their frustrations out. Right. I mean, they need to beat some SEC competition badly. Like, If they go into Auburn this week and put up a similar stat line, maybe they get moved up depending on some wins and losses to the top 10 to 15. Um, but right now, I just don't have a lot of faith in the Missouri Tigers. Now, another top 10 team that I'm just do not have faith, previous top 10 team I don't have a lot of faith in right now is the Ole Miss Rebels, who we talked about LSU earlier when in Ole Miss's loss 26-29. Ole Miss, what are you doing? Like Lane Kiffin, just it doesn't seem like it seems like there's this weird level of complacency that that Ole Miss has considering, and which is so weird because they haven't done anything since the early 60s. Ole Miss, you guys have talent. You guys have a lot of talent. You've had talent for a good number of years now, but you're not an elite program until you win anything, right? You haven't won anything. So stop acting like you have, right? If you guys, I'm never going to sit here and say people don't try, people don't care. Everyone cares, everyone tries. If you didn't, you wouldn't be here. But like I said, there's just this weird level of complacency emanating from Ole Miss right now. And I just don't know how to explain it, but they're losing games because of that, or they're just simply not as talented as we thought. Illinois, um, close one, close one. Purdue finally showed the ability to put some points on the board. I saw this game in the first half, and Illinois was pulling away, and I was like, all right, good game, guys. Then I switch back later and find out that Purdue put 40 points on them in the second half, and it went to overtime, and it took Illinois a 50-49 victory. What an insane game! What an absolutely insane game! And Purdue gets Oregon this week, the behemoth topplers, the David to the proverbial Goliaths. I mean, it's going to be one heck of a game this week, hopefully in Purdue, or they're going to get stomped like they did against Notre Dame. But Illinois, wow, you guys really, really escaped a very, very bad loss. Number 23, I've just decided I'm going to treat Army and Navy because as the exact same entity until they prove me not to. Probably in 2 weeks when Navy plays Notre Dame. If they win, they'll probably move a little higher than Army. If they lose, it probably will move lower than Army. But right now, until something like that happens, they are going to be the same team. And it's going to piss off probably a lot of Army and Navy people. But they're both winning in very similar fashions. Navy definitely holds a more air raid centric offense. Army is, finally doing that almost like a Paul Johnson Georgia Tech style of offense. Um, you know, both of them have some stud running backs in Udo and Texa. These are both teams that could definitely win the AAC, and I'm really hoping that they win the AAC or that they play in the AAC championship and then play each other in the Army Navy game just a couple weeks later. That's going to be quite the ride. And if anyone can find some Army Navy tickets that are not $600 to $800, please let me know. I would like to go to that game. To round out the list, number 25, you got the Michigan Wolverines. I mean, frankly, they're just meh at this point. They're 4-2. They're not, out of it mathematically, but without a quarterback, it's pretty imperative. It's pretty disappointing to watch this. I mean, Sherrone Moore just needs to play his style of football. He's not playing his style of football. He's trying to play Jim Harbaugh style of football without the pieces or Jim Harbaugh, right? Also, they need a quarterback. They're a five-star program. They're one of the premier programs of college football, especially as just, history and everything, maybe the premier program in college football. They should be able to recruit a very, very talented quarterback to come in and lead this team. They just aren't doing that right now. Alex Orji can't throw. Davis Warren gets nervous, and Jack Tuttle is good for about 10 plays. So, and moving all around all these quarterbacks is probably not helping for the general cohesion of the team. They've got a couple of bright spots: Will Johnson on the defense, Kello Mullins on the front end in the running back room. They've also had some huge disappointments too. This defensive line has just not been as good as we thought they would be, and like Donovan Edwards just really hasn't been as good either. If you guys watched the episode from earlier in the week, you would know that Michigan was my disappointment of the year. And I think I did this disappointment relative to what we expected from them in the beginning. That's going to round out the top 25. My honorable mentions consist of Nebraska, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, Arizona, USC, Iowa, Arizona State, Oklahoma, Syracuse, Liberty, and Duke. My Heisman watch list. A little bit to say about this. Ashton Jeanty as my number one. That is a non-negotiable in my opinion. I think that he is absolutely the number one. Travis Hunter at number two, also a non-negotiable. I think he is the clear number two in the country. Number 3 and 4 are where I'm willing to talk about it. I think Cam Ward and Dylan Gabriel are both players that you can make a case for 3 or 4, but I think that they are non-negotiable, that they are both at the 3 and 4 spots. The order is what I'm willing to talk about. And finally, number 5, I put Jalen Milroe, despite Alabama's recent struggles. I still think that Jalen Milroe is one of the, if not just the most physically talented players on this list and in the country. But it is absolutely negotiable who else goes there. There are definitely a lot of other names, especially ones that have just put up better numbers that I could make a very excellent claim for to be that fifth spot. Games to watch this week. Boston College versus Virginia Tech, Oklahoma State at number 10, BYU. That's a big game because BYU is my shock this year, and Oklahoma State was Daniel's disappointment. So if that's an upset, that's going to be very, very funny. Number 2, Oregon versus traveling to Purdue. Again, Purdue, the proverbial Goliath beaters. Number 6, Miami traveling to Louisville. Nebraska at number 15, Indiana. Number 11, Bama at number 13, Tennessee. Colorado at Arizona. My game of the week, number 5, Georgia at number 1, Texas. And then finally, just 2 teams that haven't had the best season, but is kind of a heated rivalry. And not kind of, it's a heated rivalry, in-state rivalry, and it should be just a very fun game to watch. That's going to be Colorado State at Air Force. That's going to just about round it out for the week. Again, please make sure you like and subscribe. Go check out the A to Z poll on Hoops from the Hills. Go check out the other episodes, especially the mid-year one we did earlier this week. And I hope your team wins. Get out there and watch some college football. See you next week. Bye-bye.